Welcome to Magic Arcanum. I'm Ryan Gomez. Behind the scenes is Nicole Burdick, and we're so glad you're here because it's story time. Vampire bloodlines come together in the latest Magic set, Crimson Vow, but this iconic tribe of neckbiters can be traced all the way back to the game's earliest days. Today, we're taking a look at a history of vampires in Magic, brought to you by Into the AM. They make really cool shirts, like this one, which is called the Undying Rose. A perfect fit for our video about stylish immortals. Featuring high-quality materials and a tailor fit, along with their brain-melting designs, Into the AM graphic tees are something you'll be excited to put on every morning. They're lightweight, super comfortable, perfect for the heat down here in Texas, or you can layer them under a track jacket or a coat and create your own personal style. Black Friday and Cyber Monday deals are coming up, but you're a smart wizard, so think ahead. Visit Into the AM today, using my link down below, and put stuff in your cart now. Save yourself time later. Thank me somewhere in between. Or if you're a hasty red mage, order yourself a bundle today. You'll still save 10% on your entire order if you use my link in the description down below, and you'll get the jump on holiday shipping. Either way, you're a winner with Into the AM. Alright, now let's talk vampires, starting all the way back in 1993 with the game's very first, which set the tone for years to follow. Zendikar Vampire was an uncommon 4/4 flyer for 5 mana, with the ability to earn itself a +1/+1 counter each time a creature damaged by it dies. Since there was no way to force your vampire to fight another creature within the alpha release, you had to wait for your opponent to attack into it, or let them think that they could safely block with their wall of swords while you were secretly holding a giant growth, I guess. Anyway, creature tribes weren't even close to being a thing yet, so each individual card was just the designer's best try at making something that represented monsters from pop culture and other media sources. So it's actually kind of fortunate that our first vampire did such a good job at establishing a mechanic that could be tweaked and reused many, many more times over the years. Quick, tell me everything you know about vampires. Yeah, I heard they drink blood, they're nocturnal, sometimes they fly or change into a bat, and someone out there even included their usual weakness, which is wooden stakes through the heart. Zendikar Vampire gets stronger by feasting on his defeated victims, and he can fly, both of which definitely made it onto our list of iconic vampire traits. But where would the game take it from here? Well, we would find out just a few years later in Ice Age with Krovakin Vampire, another 5 mana uncommon flyer, though this time with smaller stats but a much more powerful ability. Instead of growing his own strength when he kills someone, he actually brings them to your side of the battlefield, which is supposed to represent another classic vampire ability, them biting you, and you becoming one of them. And while we're on the topic of bites, check out the fangs on vampire hounds from Exodus. I have vivid memories of these guys staring me down from my brother's side of the table during some of my earliest games of Magic, but they're also worth bringing up because they showed vampires didn't necessarily have to be humanoid. Which brings me to Vampiric Dragon from Odyssey. He's our first gold vampire, adding red to capture the fire-breathing abilities of a dragon while also retaining the already classic Zendikar +1/+1 counters. Then, on our first visit to Ravnica, we found House Dimir using vampires as spies and assassins. Now, in the future, our fanged friends would also be found among the Orzhov, but we're still a long way from seeing vampires on the white slice of the color pie. First, they'd have to get some solid tribal support, which started with Vampire Nocturnus in M10. I love the design of this card. It cares deeply about the color composition of your deck, and it rewards you for going wide with one of Black's signature creature types by making them fly and giving them a significant power boost. It all comes together in a very flavorful mythic rare. But it wasn't until our first stop on Zendikar that the vampires really got the respect they deserved. Here, we saw their thirst for blood expressed in a new way. These vampires want to see your opponent half dead, and then they really come alive. You're rewarded for being aggressive, and your creatures get larger the more you've fed on your opponent. It creates this fun little mini game in which you try to quickly whittle down the other player before they can cast anything big enough to fend off your swarm. This might be my favorite era of vampire designs. You can really feel their hunger in the ones that watch for 10 life or less, but there's also some all-time classics in here like Vampire Nighthawk and Vampire Hexmage, which would go on to become a combo piece to unlock Merit Lage, of all things. And of course, I have to mention, Zendikar gave us the first appearance of Sorin Markov, the vampire planeswalker and self-made guardian of Innistrad. He's central to the Crimson Vow story and has connections to the Eldrazi, all of which make him one millennia-old vampire you don't want to get in the way of. Anyway, Vishkal doesn't really feel like a vampire, to me at least, but he is technically our first gold member of the tribe for the black and white color pair. He uses counters, but requires you to sacrifice your own stuff to roundabout kill other stuff, and that makes him read more like a demon to me, but he is a flying 5/5 with lifelink, so really I just wanted to mention this guy to remind everyone what the first generation of Commander products brought us, and how far we've come since then. The good news is we're about to enter the second golden age of vampires as we come to Innistrad, where transforming cards opened up a ton of new design space for the tribe. Screeching Bat literally becomes Stalking Vampire, capturing the iconic shift between animal and human form, while Chosen of Markov tells us another story, that of a human becoming a vampire after she is bitten by one herself. The block also gave us our first monocolored vampires outside of black entirely. These red members of the tribe tend to be more aggressive and feel similar to their cousins back on Zendikar. Also, note how many of them can earn +1/+1 counters by dealing combat damage to a player. That is an ability that they borrowed from the Slith creatures back on Mirrodin, but it's a great flavor fit for the vampire tribe. Remember, we're measuring these guys against their distant ancestor, Sengir Vampire. I think he'd be pretty proud of what Innistrad did for his legacy, even if they did have to tap into another color to fill the ranks. Up until this point, almost all of our vampires have been humanoid, or at least bats, or dragons, or dogs. Okay, but still, even those are all pretty vanilla compared to whatever this thing is. You see, on the plane of Tarkir, you can find vampires unlike any other in the multiverse. They have very long tongues and fangs that look like the tusks from an elephant. They also wear the face of their previously drained victim as a sort of mask. These guys are completely unsettling, and I am glad we have only seen a small number of them, at least so far. Our return to Zendikar in 2015 put the plane's vampires up against the Eldrazi, and it is interesting to see how this was reflected mechanically. The vampires no longer got bonuses for an opponent being weakened because they were no longer on the hunt. It was now a game of survival, and so we saw a lot of abilities triggered by life gain instead. This time, the vampires were more interested in preserving themselves and their allies than they were in feasting upon a hapless adventurer trying to make their way across the Royal. And suddenly, we find ourselves back on Innistrad, where the planeswalker Nahiri has a bone to pick with Sorin Markov, and every other vampire is merely in her way. Nahiri slaughters most of Sorin's family members, but maybe they were the lucky ones, because the other surviving vampires either become Eldrazi abominations or just straight up go mad. Let me break it down. Voldarin Pariah consumes your side of the board before transforming into the spitting image of Emrakul herself and then ravaging your opponent's half of the battlefield. Weirded Vampire has extra appendages coming out of her back, and the Twins of Mauer Estate climbed right out of my nightmares and onto a 3x2 cardboard rectangle. It wasn't all bad though. Elusive Tormentor transforms into an elemental mist, a unique trick among her vampire brethren, and an ability largely forgotten by pop culture. Heir of Falconwrath is another card design that works on many levels. First has got to be that art, which cleverly uses negative space to create the impression of a bat. Discarding a card activates the transformation, and in a set filled with cards carrying the madness mechanic, this was actually a great free enabler that came with the upside of a flying body. Fortunately, the vampires did survive the events of Eldritch Moon, and their story continues now with Crimson Vow, but we'll come back to check on them in a moment. For now, I want to jump over to Kaladesh, a plane full of mechanical marvels, but for me, the most memorable part of our visit here was the Aetherborn. These creatures live a fascinating and frustratingly finite life cycle, but a lucky few are able to change their fate by draining the essence out of others. This presents an internal ethical struggle. If you've got the power to extend your own life, shouldn't you use it? And if you do, should you only use it on evil people? Or is taking any life justified to protect your own? These are very interesting questions, the kind of questions the vampires over on Ixalan already seem to know the answer to, because their answer to everything is, take what you want. They are the aggressors of the plane, which you might find surprising, given that they are also our first vampires to be found in mono white. It turns out, when you mix Black's ambition and ruthlessness with White's structure and organization, you're able to generate a society that thrives on expansion and conquest, even if it means crushing the natives as you seek out glory among the unclaimed territory. And mechanically, these vampires care about things like token making, which serves them well as they try to ascend, that is, to have 10 or more permanents in play at the same time. This is a little unusual. Sengir Vampire and many of the others have been about going tall rather than going wide, but with Edgar Markov's commander card having dropped right beforehand, things fall into place. Anyway, after Ixalan, vampires would continue to see support both through core sets and our third stop on Ravnica, culminating in the War of the Spark, where Cruel Celebrant helped many players find victory by draining the life out of their opponent, one neck bite at a time. Last year, we returned to Zendikar and found the vampires in a rough situation. They're trying to replenish their numbers after suffering great losses against the Eldrazi, but the ones we still have are frankly pretty great. I really like Nighthawk Scavenger, the spiritual descendant to Vampire Nighthawk, this time with power that will likely grow as the game goes on, and I love Null Priest of Oblivion. Lifelink and Menace make her an early play that will harass your opponent while bolstering your own life total, and in the late game, she brings back your best dead creature for just 4 extra mana. Plus, how cool is her name? Null Priest of Oblivion? Come on. Strixhaven is a plane all about learning your lessons, so here's a fun fact for you. Blood Researcher completes the... well, it's not a cycle really, but she is the missing color combination, finally pairing black up with green on a vampiric body. The vampires here are centered in black, but do also touch green and white, appearing as students in both Witherbloom and Silverquill colleges. Which brings us to Innistrad once again for both Midnight Hunt and Crimson Vow. The vampires have recovered from their madness, but haven't lost their appetite for blood, with many of them triggering abilities if an opponent loses life this turn. This encourages you to be aggressive, but not reckless. You need only to spill a single drop, after all, so feel free to play with your food. You're a vampire on Innistrad during the eternal night. If you can't enjoy yourself here and now, why bother being immortal at all? I, of course, love cards that tell their own story, especially when they do it by giving you a little game within the game, like Slaughter Specialist, for example. Can you help her hunt down her prey and become the 2-mana 4/4 she was meant to be? Better do it quickly before that pathetic human picks up a weapon. And in Crimson Vow, white vampires return, a nod to the influence of Edgar Markov, who has been drawn into the schemes of Olivia Voldaren. But that is a story for another time. It's fun to look at how much vampires have changed over the game's history, and also how little. I think that means they got a lot of it right the first time. Vampires offer such a deep pool of abilities that can be represented on cards. Of course, there's the simple stuff like flying or even lifelink, but I really enjoy the deep cuts. The vampire who struts down the cobbled streets of Innistrad, unafraid of humans, or the one who paints masterpieces on canvas, one bloody brushstroke at a time. And no matter your playstyle, there's a vampire for you. They can grow huge as they siphon the life out of other creatures, or they can swarm the battlefield, eager to prove their bravery and devotion to your cause. They can be explorers, researchers, healers, or politicians. They can be mindless thralls, or sophisticated planeswalkers. Despite all of their differences, they're all snappy dressers. Which reminds me, thanks again to Into the AM for sponsoring today's video. Make sure you check them out using the link down below today and save 10% on your order using my promo code, or toss some stuff into your cart so you're ready for their Black Friday Cyber Monday deals. Let me know in the comments who's your favorite vampire. I want to hear about it. Then make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the great stories you'll only find here on Magic Arcanum. We'll see ya.